In the chaotic struggle for power known as the War of the Eight Princes during the Western Jin dynasty, Sima Yu, the king of Donghai with a distant relation to the imperial family, transformed from a schemer hiding behind the more closely related princes to ultimately emerge as the last survivor. He successfully seized control of the Western Jin court. In the year 303, Emperor Huai of the Western Jin dynasty died suddenly. His half-brother, Sima Qi, was chosen and enthroned as the new emperor, known as Emperor Hui of Jin. Sima Qi himself had no ambitions for power, preferring to act with restraint and avoiding involvement in worldly affairs. However, he had conflicts with the regent, Sima Yu, and internal power struggles within the Jin dynasty grew increasingly intense. At this time, various ethnic minority groups, including the Xiongnu, began to establish independent separatist regimes. Although these separatist regimes were insignificant at the beginning and did not attract the attention of the Western Jin court, the various factions of the Sima clan were engaged in internal power struggles for control over the central government. These conflicts spread from the court to various parts of the country. The wars dragged the people into turmoil, causing social upheaval and unbearable living conditions. Warfare and natural disasters forced the people to abandon normal work and life, leading them to become bandits or seek refuge under local separatist regimes. Armed forces opposing the Western Jin court grew increasingly powerful. In 308 AD, the Xiongnu leader Lu Yuan officially declared himself emperor. By this time, Lu Yuan's Han army had the capability to attack the Western Jin capital, Luoyang. The central court lost control over regional armies, and the people abandoned the Western Jin dynasty in favor of Lu Yuan's Han state. The Western Jin court had plunged into a severe crisis of losing the country. However, internal power struggles within the Western Jin court continued unabated. In the year 310, on the 15th day of the 11th month, Sima Yu, disregarding the safety of the central court, pretextually marched to attack the Han army under Shi Lu, taking away a main force of 40,000 troops guarding the capital city of Luoyang. Emperor Hui of Jin, Sima Qi, deeply resented Sima Yu's unilateral action in leading the army away and ordered the local warlord Goshi to attack Sima Yu. This led to Sima Yu falling ill from anxiety and passing away shortly thereafter. Upon Sima Yu's death, chaos ensued among the court ministers, generals, and soldiers who had left Luoyang with him, totaling over 100,000 people. No one was willing to take on the leadership role. Consequently, the multitude elected the military and political minister Wang Yan as the commander-in-chief. He led the large force eastward, returning Sima Yu's remains to his territory, the Donghai kingdom in Shuzhou. Upon learning of this, the commander of the Han army, Shi Lu, led a cavalry force to pursue Wang Yan's troops. Soon, Shi Lu caught up with Wang Yan's forces, surrounding them and raining arrows upon the Jin army. The bodies of Jin's soldiers piled up like mountains, with over 100,000 officials, nobles, soldiers, and civilians, none spared. Wang Yan, along with the various Sima clan members and court ministers, were all captured alive. After the battle, Shi Lu summoned the nobles and ministers of the Western Jin dynasty to his tent for a meeting, inviting them to discuss the past events of the Jin dynasty. Wang Yan was renowned for his eloquence and persuasive speech. He eloquently recounted the reasons for the natural disasters, human calamities, and the failure of the Western Jin regime. Shi Lu greatly admired him and engaged in a lengthy conversation with him. Other ministers also joined the discussion, but Sima Fan remained calm and composed. He turned to rebuke Wang Yan, saying, "Is there any need to keep rehashing today's events like this?" Shi Lu was very interested in the discussion with the top politicians and scholars of the Western Jin dynasty. However, when Wang Yan mentioned that he had never liked to involve himself in politics since he was young and even advised Shi Lu against declaring himself emperor, Shi Lu became furious. He said, "Your reputation spreads far and wide, you hold prominent positions, and you were trusted by the court from a young age. How can you claim not to be involved in political affairs? It is your fault that the world is in chaos." This caused the meeting to end on a sour note. Afterward, Shi Lu said to his advisor Sun Chang, "I have traveled the world for many years and have never seen such a cultured yet shameless person as Wang Yan. Should we let him live?" Sun Chang replied, "He is a senior official of the Western Jin court and will never work for us. What's the point of regretting it?" Shi said, "In any case, we must not harm him with our own hands." So he ordered soldiers to push down the walls in the middle of the night, crushing them to death in their sleep. As Wang Yan approached death, he sighed and said, "Alas! Even if we cannot compare to the ancients, if only we had not pursued superficiality and falsehood, and had strived to rectify the world, we would not have come to this state today." He passed away at the age of 56. Wang Yan hailed from the Wang family of Langia, one of the most renowned families in ancient China. He was talented, handsome, and sharp-witted, earning admiration from both high-ranking officials and common people. However, like many bureaucrats and wealthy youths of his time, Wang Yan enjoyed indulging in abstract and impractical discussions, avoiding responsibility for practical matters and being inactive. Later on, although Wang Yan held the important position of prime minister, he did not earnestly consider the governance of the country. Instead, he focused on safeguarding himself and protecting the interests of his family. Under the arrangements of Wang Yan and Sima Yu, the Wang family of Langia and the Sima clan managed to survive in the Jiangnan region. However, the Western Jin dynasty perished under their hands. Compared to Wang Yan, who came from a prestigious family background, Shi, a humble and illiterate man, appeared to possess great wisdom, a broad perspective, and a magnanimous heart. Shi valued Han Chinese traditional culture greatly. During his tenure as the local military and political leader in Shanghua city of the Han state, social stability was achieved, and the people began paying taxes. Shi established a Confucian academy and selected 300 sons of his subordinates to receive education in Confucian classics. Later, he even opened more than 10 elementary schools, allowing more subordinates and aristocratic children to receive education in traditional Chinese culture. Shi personally visited the schools to assess students' understanding of the significance of Confucian classics, rewarding those who performed well. People living in the Yellow River Basin region refer to themselves as Han people or Huaran. This area is also known as the Central Plains region, which is more developed in agriculture and economy compared to the surrounding areas. Ultimately, this is because it is the cradle of Chinese culture centered around filial piety, and the moral values of loyalty, filial piety, benevolence, and righteousness have promoted the development of social productivity. This has led to the agricultural and economic development of the Central Plains region, resulting in a relatively better quality of life for its people compared to those in surrounding areas. The Han people living in the Central Plains region have a habit of referring to the nomadic peoples living in the northern areas as Hu people, considering their nomadic lifestyle to be more difficult and their cultural traditions to be more backward. Shi, who lived in the Central Plains region, was a Jia ethnic group person who was assimilating into Han culture. Shi admired Chinese culture and did not consider himself a Hu person, nor did he consider himself a Jia person. After establishing the state of Zhao, he referred to the nomadic peoples as compatriots, and the Han people were called Zhao people. When Shi proclaimed himself as the king of Zhao, the rules for entering and leaving the palace were very strict, and the word Hu was particularly taboo. One day, a drunken Hu person rode a horse into the palace gates. Shi was furious and questioned the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper, in great fear, forgot the taboo and said it was a drunken Hu rode in on a horse, making it impossible for him to argue with him. Upon hearing this, Shi laughed and said, "Hu people find it hard to understand etiquette." Shi did not punish the gatekeeper. Once, the military advisor Fan Tan was promoted to the position of regional administrator in Zhongwu. When Fan Tan came to bid farewell, Shi was shocked to see his tattered clothes and exclaimed, "How did Captain Fan become so poor?" Fan Tan, being honest and simple-minded, casually replied, "Recently, I suffered from raids by Jia bandits, and all my wealth was plundered." Shi smiled and said, "Jia bandits are indeed ruthless plunderers. Today, I shall repay you." At this moment, Fan Tan realized his mistake and became extremely fearful. He bowed repeatedly, tears streaming down his face as he expressed his gratitude. Shi said, "My rules are meant to guard against those vulgar people, not to involve someone like you, an old scholar. Not only did Shi Lu not punish Fan Tan, but he also gave him 3 million in carriages, horses, and clothing expenses. During Shi Li's rule in the state of Zhao, 2 different systems were implemented for the Han people and the Hu people. The system for the Han people mirrored that of the Wei and Jin dynasties. As the cultural traditions of the Hu people were more backward and they found it difficult to adapt to the Han system in a short time, the constraints on them were relaxed to some extent, but not to the point of indulgence. Shi Lu understood deeply that the Hu people needed to change their primitive and backward way of life and integrate into the more progressive traditional Chinese society. Only then could their lives gradually improve, and society become harmonious and stable. It was precisely with the support of leaders like Lu Yuan and Shi Lu, these wise leaders from minority ethnic groups, that after overthrowing the corrupt Han Chinese monarchy, efforts were still made to promote Confucian moral values of loyalty, filial piety, benevolence, and righteousness. This ensured the continuity of Chinese culture, which has been passed down for over 4,000 years.